Okay, we're good. Okay, so what we're going to do this afternoon is just go over a couple of things about differentiated instruction. For me, when I was a new teacher, 2006, it was a big deal because I taught middle school. I taught 8th grade middle school at Homewood, and it was block schedule. So imagine teaching 8th graders 90 minutes. Yeah. It was rough. So I had to come up with ways to not only engage them, but to engage myself. And being a first-year teacher, I had taught 8th grade during my internship, but it was only 45 minutes. So going from like 45-minute classes to almost 90-something minutes, it was a different situation, different transition. So what I started doing is I started reading up on differentiated instruction. And I got lucky because my classes were really, really small. They were like 22, 23 people. Homewood would not let you put more than 24 in a class. So even though it was on block, it was still manageable. Most of the students, they knew each other from birth. So the ability levels were all pretty much the same. So it was easy to work and easy to do groups. So that was something that was awesome as well. So before we even get started, how many of y'all have heard of the term before? Probably a lot, right? Whether it's in your CSE, like literacy class or something like that, right? But here's the thing I feel like a lot of people don't realize. It's more than just strategies. It actually can be broken up into different components. And so that's what I'm going to try to do today is just go through the different ways you can diversify your content, okay? So first thing we're going to look at is what it actually is. So the big thing about instruction is that you're trying to combine different types of learning together. So whether it's one activity is just by themselves, the other activity you're doing in pairs, maybe you try to do like a whole group discussion. Another thing that I know I did more at the middle school level is I always did some kind of pre-assessment. So whether it was like I gave them a paper copy, they had 10 questions answered, or maybe it was something through Kahoot or, Quizlet Live, something you could do through technology now. But it was a way that I could see what they knew about the topic. I feel like you could probably do that in high school. It's just especially being on a block schedule, as y'all know, it's sort of a little bit harder to cover the material anyway. So you would sort of have to condense the pre-assessment on the same day as you would be doing, say, the actual activity or the information. So you'd be sort of rushed in knowing what to do with the students who actually knew the stuff. Another thing that it does, it centers on the student. So instead of you being in the middle of everything, yeah, you can have teacher-led stuff, but it also puts some more focus on the student. They can pick and choose what they actually want to learn. And then the final thing goes back to multiple intelligences. That's something for me that I've tried to do my whole entire career, is not to lecture as often, because I know not everybody is a visual, or not everybody's a verbal learner, or, auditory. A lot of people like to be, kinesthetic. Maybe they like music. So even in high school, I try to mix it up and do different things to where they're not sitting more than 15, 20 minutes, okay? So what we're going to look at real quick is a little bit more about what other educators think differentiated instruction is about. So it's a really short clip. We'll watch it, and then we're going to talk about what it is not.
I'm Larry Filazzo. Differentiating instruction. To some educators, it conjures visions of having to create a different lesson for every student in the room and long nights of planning and grading. That insanity is not what differentiation is all about. Differentiating instruction is really a way of thinking, not a pre-planned list of strategies. Oftentimes, it is making decisions in the moment based on this mindset. It's recognizing that, to paraphrase Rick Wormley, fair doesn't always mean treating everyone equally. It's recognizing that all of our students bring different gifts and challenges, and that as educators, we need to recognize those differences and use our professional judgment to flexibly respond to them in our teaching. Carol Tomlinson talks about the ability to differentiate in 3 areas: content, process, and product. For content, student choice is one way we might differentiate, like allowing students to choose their research topics or essay prompts. As teachers, we need to keep our eyes on the prize. In other words, we have to keep asking ourselves, what are the main learning objectives? One day, my students were writing an argument essay about what would be the worst natural disaster to experience. John's head was down the desk. He was not doing anything. I knew that he was interested in football, so I told him that he could write an essay on why his favorite team was the best. He would still have to make an argument just about football instead of hurricanes or earthquakes. His eyes lit up. He got to work and wrote what his mother later told me was the first essay he had ever written in school. He had followed all the guidelines of a good argument essay. The prize, in this case, was learning to write an argument essay, not learning to write about natural disasters. To differentiate by process, teachers can change up how they group students. Sometimes a mixed ability group might work best, while sometimes it might be appropriate to have same ability groups. We might have an English proficient buddy work with an English language learner to help them out. During independent reading time in my early morning class several years ago, one student tended to fall asleep. I told him that if he wanted, he could go to the back and sit on a desk and read. Soon, several others joined him. A few days later, I saw another student dozing off. Before I could say anything, one of his classmates whispered to him, "Just go sit on the desk." Again, it's a matter of keeping our eyes on the prize. What are the learning objectives and what are the best roads to get there for different students? Teachers can also differentiate by the type of product students create. The major demonstration of learning doesn't always have to be an essay or a multiple choice test. One year I had a student who liked to doodle when other students or I were talking. I told her it was okay as long as she was doodling about the information we were discussing. She built on those doodles to create a final project that brilliantly and visually represented all the key points we had covered.
And so going off of that, I feel like that's probably the easiest way to do differentiation instruction is basically coming up with different products. So what I ended up doing was I took a few minutes trying to find different strategies that pretty much anybody could use, whether you're in math, science, English, history. And so it sort of just goes through and it gives you a explanation of what strategies are. Some of them actually have pictures. Some of them you can sort of tell are probably easier to do than others. So the way I look at products, obviously some of these products are going to do better with certain classes than they are in others. Like we have a third block class that's very active, bunch of boys. So there's some things that if we do in groups, we're going to have to make sure that they're structured. It's going to have very detailed directions. And we're probably going to have to do it multiple times before they actually grasp what we're trying to get out of it. But there's a lot of them that are even dealing with just individual stuff. And some are going to be centered more towards middle school. Some are going to be centered more towards high school. But it's just a cool way to, like, if you're struggling to try to figure out how to plan a lesson, or if you're struggling on how to figure out how to get to a certain kid, try to think back to what the kid's into. That's another thing I try to do at the beginning of every semester is I try to do like some kind of multiple intelligence survey, and I keep it because some of the things you can pick up when you're interacting with the kid every day, and there's a lot of times where you may not know they have a certain kind of love, like whether they like math or they like music or they like this. So it's sort of nice to have that on file someplace else. So that gives you a little bit of idea of what it is. Now we're going to talk about what differentiation is not. And pretty much, I think this is where every educator struggles, because we think we know what it is until it comes down to being put on the spot. And most administrators will say, do it in your classroom, come up with a strategy, come up with a plan. And so there are some educators that think differentiation instruction is where you just put people in groups, when in some cases that's not the case. When you put them in groups, you're either going to be doing it by flexible grouping, or maybe you're doing learning centers or some kind of station. So when you actually put a little bit more into the process of it, that's going to be more differentiation than just do it by their ability. Another thing I feel like when I first started teaching, I always thought that the kid who didn't know something should do more work, when in reality, the kid who knows just as much as the one that doesn't, they should be doing the same amount of work. So whether it's getting ahead and doing something more advanced, or just trying to cover what's in the standards, every child needs to make sure that they're doing the same amount of work. And then the final thing, some people think giving them different products is a way that students can actually perform in differentiation instruction. In reality, yes, you want the child to be able to pick what they like, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you sort of structure it in a way where they're not only doing the easy product, but they're also doing a product that's going to help them to actually grasp the stuff that's in the standard, okay? Going back to something they said in the video,